She was the first one in every morning, 6 years running, not because she had something to prove, she had already proven it, not because she needed the approval. She'd stopped chasing that a long time ago. Her name was Elena Whitmore, senior analyst, the woman who had quietly turned Pinnacle Consulting from a mid-tier agency into one of the most talked-about firms in the country. Every major account they held, 3 of them, in fact, had come through her hands. Her strategy, her late nights, her name on the pitch deck even when someone else took the credit in the meeting room. She wore her professionalism like armor, tailored blazers, calm eyes, a voice that never cracked under pressure. The kind of woman who walked into chaos and walked out with a solution. So when they handed her a new assistant, a woman named Chloe Vance who arrived on a Tuesday with designer heels and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, Elena didn't flinch. She'd trained assistants before. She'd do it again. What she didn't know was that Chloe wasn't there to assist her. Chloe was there to replace her. And the man who'd arranged it all, her boss, Mark CEO, was already rehearsing the excuse he'd use to push Elena out the door. The golden contract had taken Elena 3 months to build. It was the most comprehensive client proposal the firm had ever produced. A full strategy overhaul for Chairman James Whitmore's global conglomerate. A deal that would set Pinnacle up for the next decade. Elena had barely slept. She double-sourced every number, triple-checked every projection, and printed the final deck herself the night before. She didn't know Chloe had come in early that morning. She didn't know that while Elena was in the parking garage, Chloe had deleted every file from the shared server and quietly swapped the printed presentation with a stack of blank pages. By 9 a.m., Elena's career was about to be destroyed, and she had no idea. But here's the thing about women who have built themselves from scratch. They don't break easy, and they always keep a backup. If you're new here, welcome. Hit subscribe and turn on your notifications, because we tell stories like this every single week. Now, let's get into it. Elena got to the office at 6:45 that morning, the same as always. The cleaning crew was still making their rounds on the lower floors. The lobby security guard, a man named Dale who'd worked the desk for 11 years, nodded at her the same way he always did, with the quiet respect of someone who recognized consistency. "Big day today, Miss Whitmore," he said, handing her a visitor badge log to sign. "Every day's a big day, Dale," she replied, and she meant it. The 23rd floor was empty when she arrived. She liked it that way. No noise. No politics. Just the city spread out beneath the glass like a map of everything still possible, and the soft hum of her laptop warming up. She pulled up the golden contract folder, the one she had been building since February. 14 tabs, 42 pages, 3 separate financial projections cross-referenced against the chairman's publicly available annual reports. She had gone so deep into Whitmore Industries' structure that she could describe every subsidiary, every joint venture, every acquisition from the past 8 years. She had even cross-referenced the chairman's documented philosophy, growth through people, accountability over optics, and built the proposal around it, sentence by sentence. This wasn't just a pitch. It was a mirror, a reflection of exactly what Whitmore Industries needed and exactly how Pinnacle could deliver it. Elena printed the final deck at 7:15. 68 pages, color-coded tabs, executive summary on linen cardstock. She stacked the copies carefully in the presentation folder, secured it with the branded clip Mark had demanded for all client meetings, and placed it on the corner of her desk. Done. Perfect. Ready. She made herself a coffee from the small machine in the kitchenette, checked her emails. 3 from the client's team asking logistical questions she'd already prepared answers for, and settled in to review her talking points one final time. She didn't hear Chloe come in. She assumed later that Chloe must have used the service entrance, or come up while Elena was in the bathroom just after 8. However she managed it, Chloe Vance arrived before the rest of the team, sat down at the assistant's workstation directly behind Elena's desk, and began her work. First, she opened the shared server, navigated to the golden contract folder, selected all files, deleted them. Then she emptied the recycle bin. Then she walked to Elena's desk, quietly swapped the printed presentation for 68 pages of blank white paper, and refastened the branded clip. It took her less than 4 minutes. By the time Elena's colleagues began filing in at 8:30, Chloe was back at her desk with a cup of green tea, replying to scheduling emails with the cheerful efficiency of someone who had nothing to hide. "You look tired," she said when Elena glanced over at her. "Big day nerves." Elena gave her a brief, professional smile. "I'm fine, thank you." She had no idea. The pre-meeting briefing was scheduled for 9 a.m. in the large conference room, the one with the skyline view that they only opened for major clients. Marcio had insisted on running a dry rehearsal before the chairman's team arrived at 11. Standard procedure. Or so it seemed. Elena walked in at 8:58 with her folder, her laptop, and the quiet confidence of someone who had done this 100 times. Marcus from finance was already there. So was Priya from client relations, and Tom, the junior associate who had spent the last 3 weeks doing whatever Elena asked without asking why. She connected her laptop to the projector, opened the shared drive, navigated to the golden contract folder. Empty. She blinked, refreshed, still empty. She checked the archive folders, the backup folder, the personal drive she shared with no one but used for overflow. Empty, empty, gone. Her breath stayed even, her face stayed still. The inside of her chest was a different story. She opened the presentation folder on her desk, the physical one, pulled out the first page, blank, second page, blank. She flipped through the stack, and the sound of those silent pages was the loudest thing in the room. Marcio walked in at exactly 9. He looked at the screen, looked at Elena, then looked at the blank pages in her hands. And then, very slowly, a different kind of expression moved across his face. Not surprise. Something much worse than surprise, satisfaction. "Elena," his voice was quiet, controlled. "Please tell me that the presentation is ready. There's been a problem with the files, a problem." He repeated the word like it was a language he didn't speak. "We have a $50 million client walking through that door in 2 hours, and you're standing here telling me there's a problem with the files. The server has been cleared. I'm going to recover. You are unprepared." He said it clearly, for the room, for the record, for Chloe, who had slipped into a chair near the back and was watching with wide, sympathetic eyes. "In 6 years I have never, not once, seen something like this. Mark, do you understand what this morning means for this firm?" She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She stood with the blank pages in her hands and looked at him with the steadiness of someone who had survived worse, even if, in this moment, she couldn't remember what that was. "I will fix this," she said. "Give me 40 minutes. "You had 3 months, he said, and then he turned to address the rest of the room. "This is exactly what I've been saying. When you put your faith in one person and that person lets you down, the whole firm pays the price." Chloe made a small sound, something that could have been sympathy, something that could have been pity. Elena heard it. She filed it away. Because here's what Mark didn't know, what no one in that room knew. Elena Whitmore had a habit, developed early in her career after watching a colleague's laptop die on the morning of a major pitch. She kept a personal encrypted backup drive, updated nightly, stored in her desk drawer. She also had a habit, developed after a performance review 3 years ago that bore no resemblance to the feedback she'd actually received. She recorded everything, not loudly, not as a threat, quietly, as documentation, as proof, because she had learned slowly and without bitterness that excellence without evidence is just a memory, and memories are easy to rewrite. She hadn't touched the backup drive yet. She was waiting to understand exactly what she was dealing with, and she was beginning to understand it very clearly. The 40 minutes Elena asked for, she didn't get. She got 12. Marcio called a full staff meeting at 9:15, not to solve the problem but to document it, or more precisely, to document Elena's failure to solve it. There were 22 people in that conference room by the time he started talking. including 3 junior analysts who had never been invited to a briefing at this level before. That alone told Elena everything she needed to know about what this meeting was actually for. Mark stood at the head of the table with the posture of a man who had rehearsed this. His hands clasped in front of him, tie perfectly knotted. His expression was the particular kind of grave that people wear when they want to look reluctant about something they're actually enjoying enormously. "I want to be transparent with this team," he began, "because I believe in transparency, especially when things go wrong. This morning, we discovered that the presentation for our most significant prospective client, a presentation that was 3 months in the making, does not exist." A ripple of reaction around the room. Glances, shifted postures. Nobody looked at Elena directly. They looked at the table, the walls, the middle distance. The cowardice of silence dressed up as professionalism. "Elena was the lead on this project," Mark continued, "and I'm going to ask her right now in front of this team to explain how this happened." 22 pairs of eyes finally moved to her face. Elena stood slowly. She had decided, in the 12 minutes she'd had alone at her desk, exactly how to play this. Not defensively, not emotionally, precisely. "The files were deleted from the shared server sometime between last night and this morning," she said. "I've identified the timestamp. The deletion occurred at 7:52 a.m. I was not in the office at that time. I arrived at 6:45 and left the building briefly just after 8. There is lobby sign-in footage and card access logs that will confirm this." A pause, very brief. "I also want to note that the physical presentation I printed personally last night was tampered with after I placed it on my desk. The contents were replaced with blank pages." Mark's jaw tightened slightly. "That's a serious accusation." "It's an observation," Elena said. "Not an accusation. Accusations require evidence. I intend to gather the evidence." Something moved across Chloe's face so quickly that only someone watching for it would have caught it. Elena caught it. "This is exactly the problem," Mark said, turning back to the room. "Instead of owning the failure, we're building conspiracy theories about blank pages." He almost smiled. Almost. "Elena, I need someone in this seat who is prepared. Not someone who's going to stand here and tell me a ghost deleted her files." "I never said ghost," Elena said. "You said someone deleted your files. Who? Who came in here and sabotaged you, Elena? Because unless you have a name, I told you I'm gathering evidence. The meeting is in 90 minutes. I know that. This firm cannot walk into a chairman's meeting with nothing. Then let me go get what I have." Mark held her gaze for a long moment. Long enough for everyone in the room to understand exactly what was happening. That this was not a professional disagreement. This was a verdict. The meeting had already reached its conclusion before Elena said a single word. "You're done, Elena." The words landed in the room like something dropped from a great height, flat and final. "I'm terminating your contract, effective immediately. Please collect your personal belongings and have them out of the building within the hour. HR will be in touch about your severance." Chloe, from her chair near the door, made a sound that people in that room later described as a sigh of regret, but the angle of her mouth said something else entirely. "Honestly," she said, just loud enough for the front rows to hear, "I hate that it came to this. I really tried to help her." 3 people nodded. 3 people who had never once worked alongside Elena, who had no idea what she'd built or what she'd sacrificed to build it. Elena looked at Chloe for exactly 3 seconds. Then she looked back at Mark. "You'll want to reconsider that decision before 11 o'clock, she said, quiet. "Calm, not a threat, just information. "Clear out your desk," Mark said. "And please don't make this more uncomfortable than it needs to be." She walked back to her desk. She took her personal items, her framed photo of her mother, her charger, the small jade plant she'd had for 4 years. She placed them in a cardboard box she got from the storage room. She did not cry. She did not speak to anyone. She reached into her bottom drawer and closed her fingers around the backup drive. She put it in her jacket pocket. Then she stood up, picked up her box, and walked toward the elevator. She had taken exactly 7 steps when the elevator doors opened. The man who stepped out of the elevator was not what anyone in that office expected. He was in his mid-60s, silver-haired, with the kind of posture that doesn't come from good genes. It comes from decades of being the most important person in every room. His suit was a deep charcoal, his shoes quiet and expensive. He had two people with him, a young woman with a tablet and an earpiece, and an older man in a dark tie who was clearly security. No one recognized him immediately. He was 2 hours early. That's the thing about extremely powerful people. They do not operate on your schedule. They operate on their own. And when James Whitmore decided he wanted to see a firm's culture before the pitch, he came at 9 a.m., not 11. Mark Seo was still standing at the conference room door when he heard the elevator arrive. He looked up. He looked confused. Then, over a span of about 3 seconds, he assembled the facial expression of a man who had just remembered that everything depended on the next 60 minutes, and simultaneously recognized that those 60 minutes had arrived without warning. He moved fast, hand already extended. "Chairman Whitmore, sir, this is an unexpected." James Whitmore walked past him, not rudely, not with hostility, simply with the calm certainty of a man who had somewhere else to be. His eyes had found Elena the moment the elevator opened. She was standing in the middle of the floor with a cardboard box in her arms, and the expression on his face when he saw her was not confusion. It was not surprise. It was something much quieter and much more devastating than surprise. He crossed the office in 8 steps. The young woman with the tablet fell back. The security man stayed at the elevator. James Whitmore stopped in front of Elena and looked at the box in her arms. "Sweetheart." His voice was low, steady, the voice of a man who was working very hard to keep something in check. "Why are you packing your things? I thought you said you loved this firm." The office went silent, not the polite quiet of a room that has paused to listen. The hollow, breathless silence of 22 people who have just realized all at once that they have deeply misread something. Elena looked at her father. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were steady. "I was asked to leave," she said. James Whitmore's gaze did not move from his daughter's face, but his expression shifted very slightly, very precisely, in a way that made the older man by the elevator take one small, instinctive step forward. Mark Seo stepped closer. His voice was slightly higher than usual. "I'm sorry, do you too, are you?" "This is my daughter," James said. The words were simple, 4 syllables. And yet the way they landed in that room, the weight of them, the direction of them, was like a beam of steel dropping through the floor. Mark stopped, started again. "I wasn't aware." "No." James finally turned to look at him, and it was not a pleasant experience for anyone watching. "You weren't. That was intentional. Elena came to this firm 2 years ago because she wanted to understand how businesses like mine are served by firms like yours. She wanted to learn from the ground up. She asked me not to interfere. I respected that." He looked at the box. "I'm no longer inclined to." Chloe, from across the room, had gone completely still. She was still holding her cup of green tea. It was no longer steaming. "Elena is the sole heir to Whitmore Industries," James said, "not for dramatic effect, but for clarity. The way you state a fact before making a decision. She has been working here as a senior analyst at standard pay with no preferential treatment. That was the arrangement she asked for, and apparently," he looked at the box again, "someone decided to end it." Mark's hand was on his collar. "Sir, I can explain. There was an issue this morning with the presentation." "What issue?" "The files. There were missing files and we had to." "My daughter prepared that presentation," James said. "I've been briefed on the scope of work she was doing. Are you telling me that the most thorough client proposal in this firm's history went missing?" "It seems so, sir, and your response was to fire the person who built it." Silence. Mark's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Elena set her box down on the nearest desk, quietly, without drama. She reached into her jacket pocket and placed the backup drive on the surface beside it. "I think," she said, "it's time to talk about what actually happened this morning." The conference room was never intended for this kind of meeting. It had been prepared for a pitch, fresh coffee, a polished table, branded notepads at every seat. Instead, it became something closer to a courtroom. Elena connected her backup drive to the conference room laptop without asking permission. The drive auto-launched a file manager. She navigated to the folder she was looking for in under 10 seconds. She had organized this drive the way she organized everything, clearly, logically, with dates and labels. No ambiguity. She found the golden contract folder, every file, every version, every projection and appendix and cross-reference data point, complete. She opened the final presentation. 68 pages loaded onto the screen behind her, color-coded and formatted and immaculate. "This is the presentation that was deleted from the shared server this morning," she said. "I back up my work nightly to a personal encrypted drive. The backup timestamp is from 11:47 p.m. last night." Marcus from finance leaned forward. Priya from client relations had her arms folded and was staring at the screen with an expression that suggested she was recalibrating several things she had believed before 9 a.m. that morning. Mark CEO was sitting in a chair near the window. He had accepted the chair as if his legs had simply stopped cooperating. His hands were flat on the table. His expression was the particular blank that people wear when they are trying very hard not to look like what they are. Chloe was standing near the door. She had put down the tea. She was watching Elena with wide eyes and a small, frozen smile, the kind of smile that is trying to decide whether it should be sympathetic or confused, and failing at both. "The server deletion occurred at 7:52 a.m., Elena continued. "I have the access log here. This is the timestamp from the IT system, which tracks every login and action on the shared drive." She opened the second folder. The log appeared on screen. Timestamp, 7:52 and 14 seconds. Action, permanent delete. User ID, CV Assist 1, CV, Chloe Vance. Several people in the room shifted in their seats. Two of them looked at Chloe. Chloe's smile was still on her face, but it had become disconnected from the rest of her expression, the way a light stays on for a moment after the switch has been cut. That's not what," Chloe started. "The IT system sometimes auto-assigns logins to the most recent user on a device. I used Elena's workstation yesterday to access the shared drive," Elena said. "To print, I was just printing something. The deletion came from the server-side portal, not the local printer queue," Elena said. "Those are separate systems. You need to actively log into the drive portal to delete files from it." Chloe's mouth opened. "Closed. I also want to show this," Elena said. She opened a third file, a video. Her laptop had a small, discrete screen recording application that she had set to capture activity on her workstation whenever she was away from her desk. A precaution she'd started after noticing, in month 2 of Chloe's assignment, that things on her desk were occasionally not quite where she'd left them. Small things, easy to dismiss. She had dismissed them until she stopped being able to. The video began. Timestamp in the corner, 8:03 am. Elena's workstation, seen from the upper corner of the screen. The desk was empty for the first few seconds. Then a figure moved into frame, blonde, slim, wearing a cream blouse and the slightly hurried focus of someone who believes they are alone. Chloe. The room watched her open the presentation folder, remove the printed deck, walk off-screen with it, return 30 seconds later with a different stack of paper, refasten the branded clip, smooth the folder flat with the palm of her hand, walk away. The video ran for 43 seconds. It was the longest 43 seconds that Office had ever produced. That's not what it looks like," Chloe said, and her voice had lost its composure entirely, the smooth edges gone, something rougher and more desperate underneath. "What does it look like?" James Whitmore asked. He hadn't spoken since Elena started presenting. He had sat at the far end of the table with his hands folded and his expression still, watching with the patience of a man who already knew the verdict and was waiting for the evidence to catch up to it. Chloe looked at him, then at Mark. Mark was looking at the table, She told me to, Chloe said. Every person in the room went very still. Excuse me, Elena said. Mark. Mark told me, he said. Elena was holding the firm back, that she needed to be pushed out, that if the presentation failed he could justify letting her go and bringing in. I was just doing what I was. Stop. Mark's voice was flat. Don't. You told me to. I never told you to delete anything. I never. You said make sure she doesn't walk out of that room a hero. Those were your exact. That is not. I have it in a text message, Chloe said. And the room understood in that moment that the dynamic between these two people had just changed entirely. That what had started as collusion had become two people trying to survive by feeding each other to the tide. James Whitmore looked at his watch. Then he looked at his assistant, who was still near the door with her tablet. Please call building security, he said, conversationally, the way you ask someone to pass the salt. And then get me Pinnacle's board of directors on the line. Security arrived in 4 minutes. They were professional about it, the kind of professional that doesn't require raised voices or dramatic gestures. 2 men in dark uniforms who stood at the conference room door and waited for James Whitmore's assistant to finish her phone call before stepping inside. Mark Seo did not go quietly. Not because he made a scene, he was too afraid for that, but because he made 3 attempts at conversation before the security personnel suggested, gently but firmly, that the time for conversation had passed. He tried to speak to James Whitmore directly. James looked through him. He tried to speak to Elena. She looked at him with the calm, level gaze of someone who has already decided they have nothing more to say on a subject. He tried once to look at the room, at the 22 people who had watched him dismantle someone's career that morning, some of whom had nodded along, some of whom had stayed silent, none of whom had said a word in Elena's defense. He seemed to be calculating whether any of them might speak up now. The calculation did not return encouraging results. He was escorted from the building with his keycard deactivated before he reached the lobby. Chloe went separately. She had retrieved her handbag from her desk with the focused efficiency of someone performing a normal action in deeply abnormal circumstances. She did not look at Elena on the way out. She did not look at anyone. The cream blouse, the designer heels, the careful grooming, all of it intact, not a thing out of place, and somehow that made it worse. The armor stayed on even after the war was lost. The door closed behind her. For a moment the conference room was completely quiet. Then Marcus from finance said, "Well," and left it there, which seemed about right. James Whitmore stood up and walked to where Elena was still standing near the laptop. He looked at the presentation still open on the screen, 68 pages of work she had built over 3 months, still intact, still waiting. "It's good work," he said. "I know," she said. He almost smiled. "Your mother used to say that, I know, not thank you, I know," like the acknowledgement was already accounted for. "She was usually right," Elena said. "She was always right." He paused. "I want you to run this meeting. At 11 when the Whitmore Industries team arrives. Not as my daughter, not yet. As the analyst who built the proposal. You earned that room." Elena looked at the screen. 68 pages. Every number correct, every projection defensible, every recommendation grounded in 2 years of watching the firm from the inside out. "And after the meeting?" she asked. "After the meeting," James said, "we talk about what happens to this firm. Whether it gets a second chance, under new management, or whether Whitmore Industries takes its business elsewhere. Either way, I think it's time you stopped working for someone else's vision." He picked up his coffee cup. It had gone cold, but he didn't seem to notice. "You've spent 2 years learning this industry from the bottom. I'd say you've learned enough." Elena looked around the room, at the people still sitting there, some of them ashamed, some of them recalibrating, all of them understanding for the first time exactly who she was. Not the quiet analyst in the tailored blazer, not the woman who stayed late and never complained. The heir. The one who had sat beside them at ordinary meetings and seen exactly how ordinary they were willing to be. She thought about what it would mean to walk back into this room at 11 o'clock, not to be witnessed, but to lead. She thought about the 6 years she'd spent building something in a space that had never fully acknowledged her, about all the credit that had been taken, all the silence she'd maintained, all the times she'd told herself that excellence was enough. Then she thought about the backup drive in her jacket pocket, about the screen recording, about the quiet, consistent habit of documentation that had kept her safe when everything else tried to erase her. Excellence wasn't enough. It never had been. But excellence, evidence, and the patience to wait for the right moment, that was everything. "Tell your team I'll be ready at 11, she said. James nodded. His assistant was already typing. Priya from Client Relations, who had not said a word since the meeting began, looked up from the table and made brief eye contact with Elena. A small nod. The kind that doesn't need words because the meaning is already complete. "I see you. I should have said so sooner. I won't make that mistake again." Elena accepted it without performing forgiveness or withholding it. She simply moved forward. Because that's what you do when you've been underestimated for a very long time and the accounting has finally arrived. You don't look back. You walk into the room that was always yours. The 11 o'clock meeting lasted 2 hours and 17 minutes. Elena presented every page of the golden contract from memory, cross-referencing her own slides with a precision that silenced the room. The Whitmore Industries team signed a letter of intent before they left the building. The following Monday, Pinnacle Consulting's board convened an emergency meeting. By Wednesday, they had appointed Elena Whitmore as interim managing director, pending a full structural review of the firm's leadership and practices. She kept the jade plan on her desk. She moved it to a window with better light. And every morning when she arrived before anyone else, still first in, still the last one standing when it mattered, she passed Dale at the security desk. "Big day today, Miss Whitmore," he'd say. "Every day is a big day, Dale." She always meant it. And that, beautiful people, is the story of Elena Whitmore, the woman they tried to erase and accidentally made unforgettable. If you made it to the end of this one, you already know you belong here. Drop a comment and tell me, what was the moment you knew the tables were about to turn? I read every single one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because our next story, let's just say revenge has never worn a better suit. I'll see you there. Take care of yourselves. And remember, your silence is not your safety. Your preparation is. Until next time.